You're listening to the Road to Wisdom podcast, weaving stories told by wonderful minds about all things motherhood, health, intimacy, politics, nature, and everything in between.
Join us on an adventure discovering unique experiences that we can learn from to enhance the ways in which we live.
We are your hosts, Chloe
and Keshia. All right, so today we've got Melanie here on the Road to Wisdom podcast. Thank you so much for coming in today, Melanie. We know it's an effort to organise a meeting when we've got 13 kids between us to organise. So, and businesses and all the things. So thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for asking me in.
Oh, we're excited. We're excited to absorb your wisdom. So yeah, if you could just tell our listeners who you are briefly, and because I know it could be a very decent history there, and then we'll get into the early developmental years in using the Rudolph Steiner lens. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so I've been working with Steiner's work since probably early 90s, and over the last sort of 20 years since I've had my own children. I was working with children before then, but once I started working with my own children, I really wanted to delve deeper into Steiner's work, even though I'd been introduced to that work earlier on. And then probably the last 15 years, I've been working for a group called Developing the Self, Developing the World, which is a group of colleagues worldwide working with adult education, teacher development and wellbeing programs for children, which is how I think I met you guys. So, currently I travel around Australia working with various Steiner schools in those fields. So that's where we're at the moment. And I've got 5 children, of course, of my own. So
you're very well qualified for this conversation.
Yeah, juggling it all.
Oh, yes, and it is a juggle. So it would be great to go straight into it and talk about basically Steiner's concepts around young development and early childhood. Me and Chloe both have 4 children under the age of 7, 8. So, yeah, we would love to hear, I guess, about that and how we can help, like with that knowledge, how we can help support them best in school, in life. So
that's great. I think one of the useful things to think about when you're thinking about working with young children is recognising that we adults have adult faculties that children are growing towards. It's not like they're born knowing a lot, and we know that on a very basic level, but I think what happens with parents is we often think, I want to teach them these adult things early on because it's taken my whole life to understand it. But that is the life, like growing towards adulthood and where you can continue your growing. So you look back upon your life and reflect and grow from those experiences is what sort of one of the things that sits behind anthroposophy and understanding the wisdom of being human. So in those first sort of 7 years of life, if we look at where they are and how we can work with them, we can actually be flexible in our adultness around them rather than asking them to step towards where we are. So rather than going, you have to grow to here, we go, where are you? And I will use all of my adult faculties and everything I've learnt in life to meet you where you are rather than the other way around. So you're in this sort of position, I guess, of being the teacher and the student at the same time.
Yeah, I like that perspective of it because I do feel like, what you said was so valid, that we do try to help our children, help by thinking, well, I've done this before, I can just give them the shortcut to it, but then they miss out on the lessons, and actually we miss out on the lessons of helping them to develop rather than just giving them the answers.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so...
And a lot of us are in that sort of reactive place where we're, our pain in our lives, we don't want that to happen for our child, or we are in reaction to how we were parented. So we're like, I'm going to do the opposite. But you're actually ending up in the same position as a human being, So, yeah, where is my child? So understanding them and going, this is where they are. And I'm so deeply interested in that because the more I work with teenagers, which is what happens in these wellbeing programs, the more I'm like, we have to work more consciously earlier on, because not only is the child being prepared for steps that are coming in their lives, but also we're being prepared as the adult in their world. So if I'm like muddled in and messed in and putting my thing on you from early childhood, you're really going to struggle in teenage years, where you have to like stand there and guard them and guide them and not be so muddled in, if that makes sense.
No, definitely.
I feel like I'm there.
Help us.
Honestly, I could go off. I think I'd probably take the conversation way off track if I started, but I feel that deeply.
Yeah. And what's so wonderful about that is that feeling is the thing that keeps us awake into what am I working upon. So it's not just understanding children in their development, but if we continually are growing as human beings, then that feeling of, aha, that's where I am, then gives me an opportunity to think about what am I growing and working upon at the same time. So that's where you then become the student. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you're moving between this, I understand where you are, I'm giving to you there, and then I'm also waking up to where I am and I grow there. I'm not asking you to grow me. I'm actually taking that in my own hands. And so it's a bit of a funny thing, because I'm constantly, like I said, working with children, but I'm also working with what am I working on? What's growing in me? Where am I? And that little feeling, like I could just see it in your face. It's like, oh, like
God,
it's like a little like bell, and you're
Yeah.
like, is this shame? Is this guilt? Like, what is this? But actually it's that little, it's almost a little bit painful. It's an awakening. And I think that's one thing that a lot of us, depending on your own childhood, you may then take that into like feeling like hopeless or helpless, and you've gone, it's too late. But actually it's like, that's something that wakes me up. Just like when you got pain in your body, if you didn't have that alert to let you know there was something wrong in your body, you would be really unwell.
Yeah, you just keep doing the thing.
Exactly.
That's you.
So it's like that in your soul life. It's like you got to have the little, the click that says, oh, that's where I need to grow. And then you got to then consciously go, okay, I'm going to write that down. What am I working upon? So see how complex the conversation can be?
Yes.
We're like, are we talking about children, or are we talking about us? But they're like,
It's a dance, right?
The same river. They're the same river, but we have to, so sometimes that confidence to know where children are, what they're up to, helps you see yourself. And other times when I'm working with people, they want to look at themselves to sort of realign that self so they can look at the children more clearly. So in that first 7 years of life, and Steiner taught, like, honestly, I don't know if you know how many lectures this man has done in his time, but he has many, many ways into looking at the development of children. So this is like one window of a possible 12 windows of the same thought, because that's one of the things he did. He really was like, let's go from here, 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 and now there's this other whole concept. So this picture today is really about that first 7 years of life, that the child's coming into a conscious relationship to their physical vehicle. So in short, it could be, we could talk an hour about that, but in short, that first 2 years of life, the consciousness or the awareness is in them waking up to this physical body, all that crying and the intensity and how sensitive they are. They're in this phase of like really awakened sense of themselves, but they don't know it's self. They just haven't bodily experience. So in that first 2 years of life, they think they are you. They're not separate to you.
Yeah.
And then around 2, so anyone who's got toddlers will know 2 to 3 is where the child, the forces of growth or the consciousness moves into more relating to the outside world. They start to see that actually not only do I have a physical body, but I have a body, you have a body, we're separate to each other. So all those tantrums, me do it myself, me big, that's them waking up to this sort of conscious relationship to self and other in the physical world. It's really like such a beautiful way of looking at it, rather than going, oh, they're so frustrating, or they're this or that. Like, this human being.
They're manipulating us.
Exactly.
No.
This human being is waking up to self and other. It's like, me, do it myself, I'm big, I'm small. And they flick between these polarities. And always out of the polarity, we find the center. So life isn't just about living on one end and then flipping to the other to balance it, but to find the center. The center is the balance. They go big, little, I am. They say I for the first time. And then even though they've separated in their physical body, so they know you've got a body, I've got a body, they're what Steiner called their soul life, and their individualized spirit is still united with all. So everything outside of them is them inwardly, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So when we kind of look at a tree and we're like, that's a really beautiful tree, but the more you sit with the tree, you get a sense of that tree. Do you know what I mean? Like there's like that exchange between you and the tree, whereas a child doesn't need to do that. A child under sort of 9 or 10 just is it. So all those those memories that people have, like, I had to run and jump this big river and then you go back and it's this tiny little creek. Those memories are usually before 9 or 10 because you're still united with the majestic nature inwardly and how wonderful it is. So even though they've had that massive change at 2 to 3, they are still united in a different way. And even that is like something to ponder for an hour. It's like they can't separate your inner life from their inner life. So how you're feeling, how you're thinking, what you're doing is happening to them at the same time.
Yeah, which explains a lot when you look at parents and in my own family, I know that when I am really stressed and I've got a lot going on and I think that I'm doing a really good job of keeping it in, my whole house is chaotic because they feel it. Yeah. That's them as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. And that is also then, again, nothing to feel guilty about. We all have stress. We're all under the pump. And it's not that you shouldn't feel those things, but when you start seeing what is inward is now being reflected outwardly, that's where, again, it becomes teacher-student moment, because what we do is we try and make them okay so that we can then become okay again, but actually they are reflecting where we need to realign.
There's no fixing required, right? It's just playing it out, letting it roll.
Yeah.
And it's so long as you're dysregulated, they're going to be dysregulated. You can't be dysregulated and then expect them to be okay and then you can come back. No, it's, that's right. So that's the thing, is we often go, I have to make that out there okay so that in here can be okay again. But actually, again, that's that inability to sort of just take responsibility. Like, this is going into my inner life, and that's actually okay, because even though all of our shortcomings are affecting their inner world, also our goodwill and our striving to grow is also affecting them. So it's not like it's not all bad.
It's not all bad. No, it's definitely not all bad. So inwardly they're still united with all. And again, that's like, you think about that, that's when we go out to the shops, when we go to the beach, or everywhere we go, they're taking in and having to have some sort of digestive process around that, and you can never fully understand it. We ask simple questions like, oh, how was your day? And was it good? And who'd you play with? And they're like, how can I tell you everything that went on? Because I'm not actually awake to that being separate to me. That is me.
Yeah. No, is your mind blown yet?
Yeah, I've just got so many questions, but I'm like, no, you can't ask that because you'll completely derail this train. I guess I'd love to just, because I feel like everyone's like, oh, the first 7 years. Like, people have a baseline understanding of what that, like, we get it. It's important, but why? Like, what's actually happening for a child who is under 7 and how do we, or maybe we should start with what are the stages, and then how do we kind of support them?
Well, I always kind of try and look into the world of like, you know, those quotes like wake up and smell the roses and all those sort of really long-term quotes that have this residue of something that's spiritually true in a way. And so one of the sayings is, show me the boy in the first 7 years and I'll show you the man. It's a saying that's there. There's a movie about that. I don't know if you've seen that one about the boy that's actually filmed in real time for his 7 years of life.
Oh, really?
And, so it's like these things of also, though, to, you know, put a little waiver in. It's not too late if you're listening to this and you've got a 9-year-old. Yeah. You know, like,
I've often thought that, especially when my eldest turned 7 this year. I was like, oh,
yeah.
Did I do okay?
Well,
are you okay? Can I help you?
I mean, it never ends. And that's the thing, is just thinking they can get in the car by themselves and they can do this stuff by themselves, but your job as a parent actually never ends. It just changes where it's at. And so wherever you haven't done well, you don't need to worry, because they'll show you.
And we'll have to learn the lesson the hard way later. Thank you for confirming that.
It's nothing to feel bad about, but of course our unconscious education from our past really it becomes a filter for how we experience things, and just to be really mindful of that. We've all had the first 7 years of life that has the deepest effect on us, and now we're living as adults. And not that we have to go back and go, who said this, who did what, but recognise in me lives things that aren't actually me. They were given to me by someone else, and I now can put my adultness towards transforming them. So it's not to make people feel bad, but to go, how do I, even just sometimes you feeling bad is you railroading your own growth and development as well. So in that first 7 years, there's many things you can do, but if you haven't done them, it's okay. There's always more opportunities.
Well, we've got lots of kids, so we can.
That's right.
If I screwed up one, I've got 3 to try out of.
Well, I was just like fascinated. It's like, okay, how many parts of me are there to grow? Because I've got 5 children and they all show my shortcomings in a completely different way.
Same.
Like not anything the same. I'm like, I just must be really like so much work to do, because these 5 kids and then
Coming
of course the thousands of children that I work with are just like, point there. See, grow, Melanie, grow. It's like, wow, I've just got so much growth to do. But of course, even the growth of getting over the guilt of that was massive. Like, because, if you have a blowout with your children, and then what some parents tend to do is then go to the polarity, which is like, I love you and you're beautiful and you're amazing, because you just feel so much guilt. That's not the middle. That is not whole. It's just the opposite end. It's like these children that go, me big, me little. They flop until they find that I, that centered place. So, so there's plenty of opportunities, basically. Short answer.
Good to know.
So can we actually go into that a little bit? So if we do have blow-ups at our children, not that I ever do that.
Oh. Someone's lying here and it's not me or Melanie.
But if we do have a blow-up with our children and say, whatever's going on in our lives, that has just taken over and it's come out at the wrong person, even though they could have been having a whiny tone with you for, I don't know, however many years. So rather than going to the polarity and being like, how do I fix this? Can I let's go get you a present. Let's go get you a treat. What would be like an actual response that comes from a centered position?
Yeah.
So that your child's not seeing you like be completely irrational. Yeah. But then it's almost irrationality on the other side of the spectrum.
Exactly.
And so there's no safety there. So I'm just, my question is.
Well, from a sort of, Steiner really gives these pictures of your biography. And so you've learnt a survival thing is to go to the opposite. When people say, I'm just never speak up. Like I'm always one that sits back. And so I'm going to speak up about everything. That's not the center. That's the other end. Yeah. And we're always doing that to balance. But it's not balancing. It's just taking it to another extreme. So you're looking for that center ground. So in some ways, there's never going to be a simple answer out of me. But the thing is to first to get to know, I'm just going to the other end. So if I can see I'm going from one to the other out of myself, rather than going, here's a recipe for it, but genuinely seeing there's the temptation to go to the other end, you're already taking a massive step because you're going, that's my patterning, that's what I do. I go to the other end. So the fact that you can see that already allows change to come in.
Yeah.
And it's from there that you'll get to know that yourself. Like it's not, I can't just say this is just what you do, because what you do is get to know that that's happening first, that you're flipping from one thing to another. And look, we're so temperamental, us parents. Like one day it's so mood-based parenting. You're in a good mood, you let them run around the table, you don't get upset about it. Next day you're fractious, you're yelling about it, and they're like, what? Like, what? I don't know what's changed in you. And so even that, just like getting hold of when we're happy, we let things slide too much. And then when we're not, we tighten it in. That's not the middle ever.
Yeah.
So it's not that you can't be joyful, but like you can't just let yourself run away with that experience. So first of all is to start seeing it. I kind of like say it's like toilet training. It's like when a child's like done a wee and they've got no idea, just like walking around, no idea they've done a wee. Sometimes that's like us. We've had a flip out and we don't even know, just completely oblivious to it. And then you get to know, I had a flip out after you've done it. And then you get to know,
I'm having a flip out.
I'm having it, but I can't stop it. And then you get to know, I'm going to. And you're like, doesn't matter how tight you hold on, it still just pops out. And then you get to have the strength to hold that back. And that's all this sort of reflective process where you are the teacher. And I think, where you're the student is like, for me, parenting with children is it's a job. It's an actual job to me. Like I have a book next to my bed for each of my children. What are they, what am I learning? And I know it is my job. Like I know it's quite, I have to be like that for my work in a way, but I also am just so interested in understanding them and myself. And you forget. How many times have you guys had a revelation? You're like, I'll never do that again. Doink, done it again.
I feel like as a child, not as a child, but in my 20s, that was a drinking experience. I'll never do that again.
Exactly. But that is one of the things. And I think even just, to have these meaningful conversations where you can actually churn it over, because our habit body is just so strong. We just go back into the old habits, even I'm never going to do what my parents did to me, next minute's coming out. Of course, you can say that for the first maybe year of their life. I'll never treat them that way. And then they start talking and walking and you're like, oh, all of a sudden this automatic response is there. So I think this getting hold of yourself really requires not to be only inspired by podcasts like this, but to actually try and take something into the life sphere. And for me, that is writing it down, because you think you're never going to forget because you feel so changed by it, and then you forget. Yeah. And you're just like in this little wheel where you're having the same revelation. But where for me, I'm like, it has to come onto the earth sphere. Like it has to be a deed that I do. And for me, that is writing it down.
Do you feel like that kind of breaks the habit body a little bit?
It does, because we're so automatic that like our unconscious living is just like, if you switch up your kitchen, you will actually see how discombobulated you get because you're just automatic. Yeah. And to stay awake and to stay learning, we have to
break it.
We have to break habits. And so that's where the children become the teacher, is they're like, see that spot there? That's where you need to grow. And they're so dedicated. They're so dedicated to their task.
So dedicated. That's great. That was a really good word.
It's like, I just feel at times I just think, thank you so much for just turning up and showing me where I need to grow. And I'm sorry you've had to bear that for so long for me to be like, oh, I got it now. I got it.
Yeah.
So
I think it's a big thing for us to do that too, because I can't imagine our parents sitting there going, what can I learn from my children? Like that just wasn't a thing.
It was more like, how do I create order? And
how do I
that's
create
something
good
that
children?
I really struggle with too. I'm like, and to just use my current situation as a quick example is like, one of my kids doesn't want to go to school anymore. She's only 5. And I'm like, okay, well, you don't want to go. I don't want you to go either. And I feel really guilty. And I'm like, well, let's not, like, what do? I need to take action. But then there's like a part of me that's like, no, perseverance, learning to be, we can do hard things, courage. And I'm like, what would I, like my mum and dad would never have given me the option. Like, let's figure this out. It's like, no, they go to school. This is it. There's no option A, B or C. It's like, this is what we're doing. And so I kind of feel like there's that mind that wants to be like, no, I'm going to teach them a lesson here. I'm going to create the order as opposed to what is going on here.
This is a perfect example of what we've just been talking about. I've got a child that is saying this and I can understand that. I'm like, yeah, I don't want you to go. You know, it's like, I'm not put a form around you. But then your other self is like, I'm going to put a form. And so that's exactly it, is going, what is true between this human and I, and not letting her run the show, if that makes sense. She's trying to wake you up to that old thing of putting form and order in cannot be balanced by letting her do whatever she wants, you know. It's like, and so just for my own, you know, I had a pretty traumatic childhood experience where, you know, it just wasn't right for me to be at this school, and my parents were just so embarrassed to tell anyone about it because they're like, oh, I don't want to put anyone out. And like, I had like full-on kidney infections and I was being diminished on the daily by this woman, and like my hair started falling out and like just full on. I was like 7 years old, and, you know, like mum and dad just like can't believe they did that, but it's not their fault. Again, that was their own biases going, don't put other people out. Don't do that. So looking at that, just that question for you is like, and this is useful for others, is to go, what is true here? Like for the whole family, not just that child, not just you, but is it true that this is the right place for her, that school's the right place for her to be? On a family level, can we support her not being there? Probably not, depending on your configuration. And then kind of just going back towards understanding the wisdom of it and what's required, and then taking your steps from there rather than taking your steps from the reaction of wanting her to be okay or the reaction of telling her what to do. Because essentially the middle is a little bit of both, flexibility and form. And
it's hard, right? Because they don't give you they can't communicate clearly. Like she'll get home and be like, love school, best time, but then I hate school. And you're like, okay, cool. What do you want to do? Like, is it even up to you to decide what to do? So it's kind of like.
She's 5, did you say?
She's 5, yeah.
So it's really useful too, is just to watch our language around them, because essentially their social connection is being developed from birth. Human beings look for social connection. And I get a different part of you depending on how my day is. How do you turn up differently when she's had a bad day compared to when she's had a good day, rather than just turning up, being with her? And so I kind of say to parents, just try and get rid of how was your day, what went on, why was it good, why was it bad? They actually don't really know. And then if you look behind those questions for yourself, what you're really trying to say is, let's find each other again because we've been away from each other for the day. So often say things like, it's so great to see you, rather than how was your day? So try and bring questions to her that mean that your consciousness is reuniting with her rather than your moods, if that makes sense, because what they get used to is it sits mum down, I get more attention, there's 3 other siblings, and so not consciously, if that makes sense. Yeah. It's just like this learning a pattern.
No, I've noticed that because one time one of my kids had a nightmare and we were like, oh my God, the nightmare. Oh, tell us all about it. And then the next, like my 3-year-old's like, I had a nightmare. And we're like, darling, it's not cool to have nightmares. We're not going to give you more attention if you have a nightmare. Yeah. And for like weeks and weeks, everyone had a nightmare every day. And we're like, Okay, we're not
It's so
giving
funny,
any
isn't it?
attention to this nightmare.
Just one time. You just have to do that thing one time.
Yeah.
Just give your kid a vitamin C once while you're on the phone, and then you're screwed forever. They're like, where's the vitamin C? Every time you get on the phone.
Homeopathics for us.
Yeah.
Can I have one? Like someone's
Because they
someone's
taste
done
like
themselves
sugar.
a-
They think
yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
treat.
Someone's done themselves
So,
an injury. And,
Yeah, so I think that's a really lovely picture is like what presence am I bringing to my children? And again, where's that mood based? Because I have to bring the same level of presence no matter what your day is, whether it's good, bad, sideways. And their day does not create your inner world. Your presence gives them a place to sort of digest their day. And what we often do is give more attention to negative things. So that's where it does come back. 9,
Especially when you're
and
projecting
above.
your own experience onto it too. Like
Yeah.
I hated school. I had, like bullying experiences and just like hated going and would so much had rather spend the days with mum or, my grandparents or something. And so I'm like, oh, it's just such a hard one to there's so many layers to it for me. I'm like, pull her out. She can't go anymore. Versus like, hang on, education's important and there's growth here.
Well, is it important for your family? Just that simple question. Can our family maintain having a child home? It's not the right reason to send a child to school, but it's a really important question. But like you said, this is something to do with me and she's going to be the one that shows you that bit. And that's not going to go away.
Thank you, Pippa.
I think what's really great about that, because I'm just trying to imagine myself as a child and having the adult in my life be so steady and secure that nothing I tell them shakes them, like doesn't change their anything. Like, I mean, if I'm happy, they're excited, but not like, oh my God, everything's overjoy and like, let's celebrate with ice cream kind of thing. Or if, something's really like I found something really hard at school and have come home and just been like, this was awful. This person was mean to me. Like my teacher yelled, whatever it is. And you've just got your adult there to just listen and be like, yeah, I hear you, and not dive into that emotion with you, which I think is something I've heard you say
And feel
before,
it like it's your
Melanie.
own trauma.
Well, it is
Yeah.
your own
It is,
trauma
yeah.
outside of yourself, but they are not experiencing it that way. And so, again, it's like, how do I help you come back to the center? Or how do I help you harmonize your experience? Because they've got to go every day and they're going to strengthen in that. It's like, give you a lemon foot bath, put a warm hot pad on, all the things that like make you it's not taking away that thing, because we're not trying to take them away from it, but let them know with our support, you'll get through this, because that intensity gets more as they go through the emotional development in sort of 9, 10 and then into the adolescent years. So we're trying to give them tools in this first 7 years of life, like that I'm standing here and when I can't stand here, I do something. We might both go for a walk. We might both look under the trees because I'm also wobbling here.
Yeah, I guess there is also an element, with the Steiner, because Steiner's not available to us. It's like an hour drive away. And so, we started there and we haven't been able to go back there. But I often think with Steiner's approach to like reading, and there's an age for that. And I often wonder, like, is there an appropriate age to be at school? Or do you know what I mean? Like, is it just because sometimes I think she doesn't want to go to school. She's 5. She shouldn't be there. Steiner said 7 or 8 or 9. Or do you know what I mean?
Well, these are all really useful questions for you personally to take on, but rather than sort of letting yourself run away with it, ask the question and don't try and find an answer. Just say, it doesn't matter what Steiner said. Like, is this right? Is this true?
Yeah.
Is she ready? But what we try and do is we're like, again, our education 1 + 1 = 2. And so you ask someone a question, they just answer it straight away. It's like, no, you got to ponder it. You got to like take it in.
It's a really
and
good point.
consider it. And like if, again, for one of my children where I can't see what they need, which happens a lot, I'll just take them into my nightlife for a couple of nights. That's one of the exercises that he left was this, you take them into your nightlife for 3 nights.
What is that?
Just take your child in, like think about them.
Oh, yeah.
What is it they require? What do I see? What's going on? You're not trying to answer it. You're just literally consciously taking them across the threshold with you to sleep. And then on the fourth morning, there might be a dream or an insight that comes in of knowing what you need to do. And it just recently happened with our 13-year-old, where she's extremely introverted. And so I just pondered her for a couple of days. And what came to me was that how much she's having to take in from the world. She doesn't have that buffer to digest it, so she feels full all the time. Those sensitive, introverted people, you know, they don't feel buffed up by the world. They feel like they've taken away from the world. And so I was like, oh, she needs this sphagnum. We need to do these baths on her and actually make that buffer juicier for her. And that came from that sort of process of just considering her, just holding her, just turning her over in my heart. And then there came the answer.
I just had a download about just really like it just requires that deeper caring, like that deeper nurturing, and just instead of making the decisions, it's like, how can I care for you more, or how can I be there for you more, and what can I give you in this moment for you to arrive at. Do you know what I mean?
And I think it really, like, doing a practice like that really helps us to not make decisions out of reaction. Like it then comes from a more centered place, because if we make decisions on the fly, it's usually coming from an emotional place,
and it's ours, not theirs.
Yeah, exactly. And and then that, I think, increases the child's feeling of not being safe and not being held, because they're kind of like, oh God, mum or dad's going to react to like this little thing or that little thing. And so now I have to like change myself to stop
or
that
I have
from
to
happening.
now also digest that on the thing on top of what I'm digesting. But what they really want to know is, this too shall pass. You will come through this. And you know, again, it's not like you don't want to inflict pain onto your children, but you have to really ask this question, like look back on your own life and even these traumatic events. What has grown in you because of that? Like often, like how much poetry or art or songs are written out of how wonderful life was. Yeah. It's mostly about this human grappling and overcoming of something. And so in some ways that first 7 years of life is like in the physical world, you know, where they haven't fully woken up to their inner life. We're trying to help them balance it. How do we hold them? And we do that by nourishing them physically. Like you hold their diet for them in that first 7 years of life. So you imagine you're also holding the diet of their inner world as well. So that how do you care for someone when they've had a really big day? They don't care for you. That's like miles away. Maybe when they're in their adulthood, they'll think about you. But sometimes they do. But we don't need them to care about us. That's in our hands. So when they've had a big day, rather than going, it's been a bad day, let's go have an ice cream and make that go away. We go, let me take your bag for you. Let's go and see our favourite tree. Let's have a lemon. How do you care for someone who is living life and learning something new every day?
Do that, because most of us probably didn't receive that.
No. Exactly. We're all struggling with it, and that's the whole thing of this.
It's an opportunity to reparent ourselves and recare for ourselves. And, you know, for me to respond to that would be responding to my own experience of, you know, having a hard day at school. So, I like that. I feel good.
Well,
all right, she's going to stay at school.
It's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because it's like you have to be in the picture. It's the whole family. And, a lot of people say, I can't do all of that. Like I've got 5 kids. I work away. I've got a husband that works a lot. We volunteer a lot in the community, and that doesn't mean I'm more than anyone else. But these moments don't have to be an hour. I'm going to take you out on an hour date. Like they can literally be looking in their eyes and just giving them your full presence as you're passing their lunchbox to them in the morning. That just means so much. It means so much.
Little moments of connection. I don't make my kids put their shoes on before the car now, so that when we get to school, they sit down and I help them with their shoes. And it's like a forced connection, because otherwise, like doing all the things around the house, getting lunches ready, getting you dressed and getting I'm not present with any of that. And I know that I'm not, and I can't be, because there's too many things I need to tick off in my mind. So that was one thing that I tried to, just shoes don't have to, like, I put them in the car.
That's
you don't
very
have to put them
sweet,
on.
actually. It's a beautiful picture.
Yeah, well, it's the only, otherwise I'm like, when am I going to fit in my connection? Whereas that really forces me. And it wasn't like I thought of that. It was actually just something that I was getting so frustrated because they wouldn't put their shoes on before the car, and we'll get to school and it was like a week. And I actually think it was after I heard you talk at the school, Melanie, that I was like, flipped it in my mind. I'm like, you know what? This is my moment. This is my time to shine. I'm going to help you with your shoes on.
And it's like that final goodbye.
Yeah.
Well, it's just that opportunity for the best part of yourself to turn up. And it might also have an expiry date. Like, don't be stuck to, I always do that. Because if it's not nourishing it after a point, then you know, okay, there'll be some other way. But it's that, I think it's that thing of you're working with a conscious deed. That's an alive and awake deed.
Yeah.
And eventually you won't need to do it because it'll just live in you. But that's that thing of writing it down. It's like it's making it something. And you're right, there is kind of an opportunity to make whole what wasn't whole for you as a child. But you're not doing it because you don't want them to not be whole. You know what I mean? It's like they're going to have something.
Yeah.
You do want to get through the day as whole as possible, which is why I kind of go, this is a job. Like even when I'm working with 10, 11-year-olds, they can say to me, oh, my mum's like yelling and screaming at me, and then her friend rings and she's like, hi, like.
Oh my God, stop.
And
Didn't just relive something I've done that
it's
many
just
times.
this thing of like how we're constantly giving the best of ourselves to the outside world when in our own home, the people we're supposed to, love the most, and they get the sort of remnants of ourselves. And so that has been something for me. It's like I want my kids to know that I'm the same person out there as I'm in here, that there's not a major change in me between home and out there.
Yeah, imagine a child always witnessing that. And that's actually a big reminder for me because, often I'll be like, come on, school, let's go. And then voice message you and something like, with the interview today, all right, see ya. And like,
let's be all connected.
I'll collect some cookies and whatever from the thing and see you soon, babe.
Get out of the car, kids. Now we've got a recording to do.
What is wrong with me? Why does mum not speak to me like that? But she's telling me to,
be nice.
Yeah.
You're telling them, be nice, be kind, blah, blah, blah. And you're just like overpowering them. And, it is like, it's just such, this is what I mean. Like with this conversation, you're just going to just tip into the tiniest little bit. But the thing is that finding something in this and thinking, I can work with that. You don't have to start with all of it. You just start with one little bit. Your children are going to show you the way anyway. But it's like, what can I do? Like, is it that I'm going to try and bring my presence? Is it going to be that I try and stop asking questions after school, but just say, so good to see you? And think, like, for me, even years ago, it was like preparing myself to turn towards picking them up from school. That was what I worked on for ages. It's like you've got your day and then you're picking them up. There has to be a conscious turning so that your best part can turn up, because otherwise... Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, because I just had a light bulb moment because Willow, my oldest, has been saying to me heaps. She looks at me in the car and I am thinking about the recording we just did, all the work I need to do once they're in bed, still ticking off things when I come and pick her up. And she said to me the other day, she's like, what are you thinking about in your head? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And she's like, well, you make these faces. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I like, not until you just said it, like I'm not present with them when I pick them up because I'm still running through all like the list of things, and to just, I mean, it's not that big a time to just turn that off, shift my attention to my children while we're in the car. And
well, something has to sit and wait.
Yeah.
So what's going to sit and wait? That's the whole thing is and it's like, so put down the work. That's all there. Yep, it's stressful. Yep, but why is there more pressure on these outside influences over the pressure that they require?
I don't know if I saw a thing that popped up on Instagram the other day, and it said something about like mothers really not committing to the role of being a mother. Like they have all these kids, and then it seems like there's something more important to always be done than the children, and it really hit home for me. I was like, I not only resonate with that, But I also see it a lot. I see mothers treating or speaking out as if their kids are just the biggest pains in their asses, and that the best time of the day is when they're gone to bed, and I'm like, oh, what is that? Like, that is a thing. Like, we're constantly being pulled away from them, or not really, you know, like the disconnect is almost encouraged or glorified.
Yeah.
It's such a funny thing, isn't it? Because again, you can sort of just see the remnants of the past, you know, like when we spoke before about our parents wouldn't da-da-da-da-da. And so what happens is in evolution is that we evolve through these things. Now parents were more evolved than their parents, and, you know, so on and so forth. But what happens is residue also comes through as well. So even that is like, is that a response to being undervalued as a woman? Is that a response to being, you know, like asked, what are you doing with yourself now? Your youngest is at school, prove yourself, blah, 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 you know, and then is it a response to being kind of, disassociated with it because of your own inner experience? And then you've got other people that are like, I'm so present, but they're actually not giving their kids space. Like, there's just so much. And there's just so much learning going on for all of us. And it's hard when you see that, but it's really good when you see it, because that's also something about yourself. It's always like, it always reflects something back. Why did I see that? Where do I do that? Where do I do that to others? You know, like it's...
And I think like the biggest thing is not, when you do recognize it, not flipping to the other side of it. It's then just sliding it back a bit so you can hit that
like,
center
there's
point.
a message there waiting for you if you're willing to, or you're open to it. Because when I did read that, I was like, holy shit, I adore my kids. I want to homeschool them. I want to be with them every minute. Like, it's everything. But at the same time, I do feel like, I'm like, oh, when is the day? And I just want to like when am I going to have my time? And I'm like, well, that's not what being devoted to them or being a present mother, or like, do you know what I mean? It's like, why am I also really wishing to be away at the same time? But it's not, it doesn't really match.
It's so good though. See, that's another really good point though, because you're like, they're not two rivers, right? There's not like me as a mum here and me time over here. They are the same thing. And so your children might take you away from your center, but your center is still there somewhere. And having them away from you is also not the center. It's the flip. See, they take you away, you need to be away. But it's like, how do I be whole and me in that? And so again, this work is, the more you can practice that, the less you need time to yourself, because you are yourself in that. There's no... It's so great. There's such good ponderings, because again, it's just trying to look at it from, rather than being in it, going, oh yeah, there it is again. Children away from me.
It's just perspective, right? And we had another conversation, and it was like, you know, as a mother or as a wife, like if you're looking after your, you know, the nucleus of your family, and you realize that you don't need to go away from it so much, or you can give so much more if you're...
It was the cup, like coming from a full cup. So we had another guest on who was explaining how if you use the cup analogy, then all of a sudden you're empty. Like, it means that you have to keep filling this to be able to keep giving. But if the giving comes from a place of, like, if the giving is what gives to you, then you're always
it's an eternal
full.
That's right.
Yeah,
it's that eternal source that is giving, and that's that thing of,
that's like a balance point.
When you're in connection and seeking connection, the resource is not you. It's not a cup. It's not you filling your cup, but something outside of you fills your cup.
You're not.
And so again, like wanting to teach your children to, we do that for them, but what does it for us? Do you know what I mean? So that's the thing, is like when I say I turn off cooking dinner because I know I'm getting fractured. I'm like, this is really full on, and turn off dinner and just go lay under the clouds for a minute or two. And they're all like, what's she doing? Because I've got teenagers.
Mum's losing it again.
But actually they're like, Mum's coming back to herself again. Do you know what I mean? And that ability to be able to go, this makes no sense now. But also imagine being the child in the presence of someone doing that, rather than that like quadra forte, soldier on, just get in, and then you all then I yell at you at the end of the day. Like, it's just, there's so much learning. And so that's why I'm sort of saying we can't teach them it. We live it in those first 7 years. So all the things that we want them to be, we be that. So if they're being impatient, then you are practicing patience.
Yeah. And I think the best part is that if you've missed it in the first 7 years, you'll get to do it later.
What is that going to look like? Can we just have a little pre-warning? Like, okay, look, you didn't meet anything in the first 7 years. This
Don't
is what
sell yourself short.
This is what it's going to look like when they're 10. Like, is it like a force, or is it just
I guess it's that thing of like, if you're kind of looking at the wool as it's getting knotted and you're undoing it, compared to not looking at it for a few years, the knot's a little bit bigger, but still undoable.
That doesn't give me any. I'm not relaxed about this.
Well, I think the thing is, it just says something about your biography and how you've been educated. Like, your unconscious education has you a bit more tense about things. Like, you're going to make a mistake. It's like something around your
I'm only
first
just
7
thinking,
years.
like, do we need to move to like Central Australia? Do we need to move to Africa? Like, what are we going to get here? We've got 3 daughters. Whew, teenage daughters.
It's such a fun thing though. I've got a 21-year-old and an 18-year-old, and my third one's just going into adolescence now, and it is really good. Like, I was really afraid of teenagehood because it was pretty harrowing
people
for me.
just always say, oh, you're going to be, oh yeah, you're going to have your hands full. Oh, what are you going to do when they're teenagers? Like, there's so much.
But even just looking, like, sometimes my daughter, who's 7, turning 8 this year, like, some of the answers I get from her would take me back, and I'm like, oh, what is 16 going to be like?
Yeah, that's right. But so that's the thing. It's that reaction rather than going, this little person is actually vomiting back something she's heard from somewhere else. It's
Probably
not her.
me.
It's not her. So it's either you or someone else.
We'll just say that forever. This isn't her. This isn't me.
It's true though, because
It's a friend down the street. Like,
that being that you met, if you were pregnant with a baby, or you met them when they were first in that first 12 months of life. You know, when you like, if you carried a baby, your pregnancy, and you're like, oh, I just feel, you know, those words that you use, they're really this or they're that.
Juicy.
Those, just like, they're patient or they're strong, or you get a real sense of the virtue of this person coming in.
yes.
And then they come in and they carry that presence, and you're like, yes, this little peaceful thing. And then, of course, they start crying or whatever, and you're like, I thought they were going to be peaceful. But the virtue... The virtue is
This
still
isn't what
there.
I was promised.
The virtue is still there. And again, that's just our biases, where we were like, I perceive this, so therefore it's going to look like that. But actually, one of the ways I work with it is like, try and go, who did I perceive? If I don't know what I'm doing, like even with your little 5-year-olds, like, who did I perceive in that gestation period, in that first sort of 12 months of life, but particularly that first part of life where it's so open, like you really feel like you're in something very different. And then that's who they truly are. Like, that is the eternal part of who they are. But then they've got to go through a schooling of life. And so that kind of moves to the back, and life happens, which is preparing them for, in their adult years, who they truly are coming forward. So when you're asking this question of what happens if I stuff up the first 7 years of life, there's a schooling. Your life is happening because it's preparing you for something in the future.
Necessary.
That's right.
As well.
And what's your role in that? So like, if I've got a child, you know, she's got this just such a virtue for strength, like really just, it's there. It was so pronounced when I first got pregnant with her and all the way through. And I think to myself now, like, rather than like stamping that strength out or letting it overtake the house, how do I participate in preparing her to be a person in the future that wants to give her strength to humanity? So it's like this joke in my house. This is the future of humanity we're talking about here.
Well, it is, right? All of us.
So what happens is we're like, well, this is happening to me, and what do I do with my child? But actually, like, how do I stand so that I can grow myself into wholeness. The parts that I know that weren't whole because of my own childhood are now in my hands. They're not in someone else's hands. And then in that, I'm participating in this other person growing towards a future. And it's not a quick game. It's a long game. And you might never even see the fruits of that. But that's what evolution is that you don't see the fruits of the work you've done. There's a beautiful saying that wise is the human that plants a tree knowing that they may never sit under the shade of that tree.
It's really true.
Oh, that hits.
So this is what sits really behind Steiner's work, is that we're placing these people in the world so that they have this genuine freedom within themselves to bring their capacities and virtues to the world rather than using it for self-gain. And look at the world we're in. There's a lot of self-gain going on.
Oh, yeah.
But that's why we need the children to love the world they're in. And the world, to show them that the world is, the environment is here to give to them. They don't have to save the environment. That's more of a teenage question. But even then, the teenagers feel so overwhelmed by how screwed up the world is. So this constant thing where, I'm under a cloud or I'm sitting under a tree is also trying to show them that something outside of them is giving to them. So that they in the future want to protect that for themselves and for others.
How can we quickly, if our kids, if my kids aren't going to a Steiner school, so they're not having this mega influence day in, day out, what are some of the things without, overwhelming ourselves as parents of multiple children, make sure they're getting a sense of this in the house, in the home, apart from everything that we've just spoken about, obviously, which
apart from you taking on the ownership for it.
Yeah, exactly. Because they don't
practical things.
The practical.
Yeah.
Well, I always had this thing that, the Steiner curriculum unto itself is a healing curriculum. It's a curative curriculum. It heals and gives them something for their future. There's still human beings involved in that trespass against your child that you have to deal with. And so for me, it's like I always said, if I couldn't send them to a Steiner school, I would still be committed to showing them wholeness all the time. So you think about a meal. Again, it's like how we nourish them with food. How do you nourish your soul life? How do you nourish who you truly are and what you're here for? And then break that down for a child. So, how we break food down for them and don't ask them to eat the same things. It's like that for them. So one of the things in that first really 9 to 10 years of life, if the child is united inwardly with all, how do I speak so that it keeps you united with all? And one of the things, there's 3 actually really quick things, is one of them is to speak in pictures to your children. The whole picture of where you want them to go rather than what you don't want them to do. So what we do is often speak in the negative. Don't do this. Don't do that. Don't hit your brother. So when I say hit your brother, don't hit your brother, the true picture is seeing someone being hit. Yeah. Because don't doesn't have an image. It's not true. There's you learn symbols around that. So every child under sort of 10 and people who are on the spectrum they always see in pictures forever. That's how they perceive things. So one of the things is to speak in pictures. What I'm saying is giving you a direction of what we're aiming for, not what we're not aiming for. So even last night with my 3-year-old, I just pulled her up next to me. I said, come and sit next to me on your bottom. But just even that is just so different to, come on, get up here, or, where is up here? Come and sit next to me on your bottom. Just constantly show you the way, just in my language, in my, my words, in my activity of my body, so that you don't have to try and decipher. It's like there's no arrow in that. I don't know where I'm going to go. So one of the things is try and speak in pictures. You might work on that for the next 7 years. Because you then, when you actually think about it, we're constantly
giving really crappy direction, hey?
But even but we want it to be the right thing, because we're just trying to say, be kind, don't hit your brother. But actually we could say we use our hands to care for each other. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think like, oh God, I could give so many examples, but like one of the things that I got taught early on in my Steiner education was I used to ask my kids all the time, like, oh, do you want to go have a bath now? It was never an option. Like, but I would ask them, do you want to, or should we go do this? Or, but we actually need to get in the car and go to school now. Like, not should we get in the car now? Like, so yeah, that was one thing that I've found that I had to definitely switch up. But this is
that you're creating the invitation. It's still an invitation to join you.
Yeah.
But the invitation isn't so open that they decide whether they're going to do it or not. It's like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so it's like I'm inviting you energetically in.
Yeah.
So, you know, like again, yesterday I've got a child with a fever, and I wanted to look at her body because she had some spots, and I was like, and she's 3. She's really fiery at the moment. And she's like, no, you're not looking at my body. And I'd be like, it's mummy's time to look at your body now. And she's like, no. And then, you know, it's got a little bear, and I'm like, oh, Maple, have you got spots? And I was looking at Maple, and I'm like, Maple wants to do that too. You know, it's like I've got to bring you in rather than go up against you.
You're going to go to their level as opposed to them.
And I think it doesn't matter how many children you've got, like I said, and then I'm switching to a 21-year-old conversation, which is totally different.
You forget, and you're like
totally different. So again, it's just that honouring. What's happening in your world?
Bear's telling me all about his day. Like,
but it's like it's hard to kind of switch yourself back to the littlest one of the family because you kind of are just going to the biggest one so much more. But yeah, it's like this. It's not that you're taking choice away from them. It's more that you're trying to give it in a way that they can step into it. So do you want bubbles in the bath, or do you want a blue bath?
Yeah.
But you're having a bath. That's not negotiable.
Do you want to hop to the bath, or do you want me to
Exactly.
carry you to the bath?
How many steps forward does it take to get to the bath? Oh, how many steps when we go to the bath backward? You know, it's like their energy, and because that's the thing is when they're coming into relationship to their body, so you've got your body and the periphery of your body, and then you've got my body and your body. But then the third phase between 4 and 7 is this, that there's a power in my body that I'm learning how to use. So there's this kind of, they might call it the will, but it's this thing where you make and hold back movements out of yourself. So when you say to a child, don't touch that, and they're like, I'm not touching it. Their head knows not to touch it, but this force that moves us, that we're in relationship to moving and holding back ourselves, is what's being schooled between 4 and 7. So when we're saying things like we're putting that in their hand, like the will just run around and do whatever it wants. It's not the actual child being in relationship to what it's doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So the boundary is to try and say, we're going to move the will this way because you're still waking up to that relationship to making and holding back. So you know that chocolate challenge on social media where they put little kids in front of chocolate? Have you seen that?
Yeah.
And they're like, don't touch the chocolate. They're videoing their kids and they're like, don't touch the chocolate. I'm just going to go to the toilet. And they're calling out, don't touch it, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, just like eating it straight away. That's this will is like what I want to do and what my body does aren't quite fully in my hands yet. Mm-hmm. That's when we know they're ready for formal learning actually. Is that they've woken up to the movement they make and the movement they hold back. So
how would we test that?
Well,
chocolate
apart,
the chocolate test.
Okay, Pippa, we're going to sit down. I'm going to put some chocolate in front of you.
You know,
this
sometimes,
is your fate.
Well, sometimes you say to them, okay, it's time to brush your teeth, go and brush your teeth, and they get waylaid by other things. And that happens for all of us.
Everything.
What if your kid's just a fairy?
Yeah, exactly. So that means you definitely, so you're using your conscious and healthy relationship to the power of the will in you to help them move through it. So you give the verbal cue, which is a picture. If they can't follow that, then you're using your energy, your body, or just your body's energy to move in that direction to show them this is where we're going to go. Because you think about...
So if they need you to move with them, they're not. That would be a cue. Is that what you mean?
Exactly. So if I say something once and they're not able to do it, then that means I have to stop what I'm doing to help you complete what you need to be doing.
My partner's not even ready for formal education.
So you're saying that saying it over and over again, just at different times and with different tones, isn't gonna
it just
doesn't get.
That's where you start the slippery slope to taking it personally.
Starting to see my
But
downfalls.
it's really good. It's such good education for yourselves because, like I said before, their developmental milestones are creating the foundation for the milestones to come, but it's also creating muscles in you that you need later on. Like when you introduce personal devices, for example, and you're trying to stay on top of the timing of that, your thinking, feeling, willing has to stay in relationship to that. You can't let them go, just hand it back when you're ready. No, I haven't developed that capacity yet.
Yeah.
So this thing of stopping what I need to do to help you with what you need to do, you actually see a few things. A, we say a lot of things that we don't even need to say or demand a lot of things of them that we're not able to actually help them finish off. And B is like, what is the most important thing here right now? What is essential? So is it essential that they pick up that sock, or is it essential I finish this thing I'm doing and then I'll help them with that later on? Mm-hmm. So you're speaking in pictures and then you're helping them move through that because the wheel is all over the shop and you're giving it a form. This is where it is, it's back in your body. So when you see in a Steiner kindergarten, the circles, the up, the down, the fast, slow. So even stuff like that, like if I'm walking down the hall and they're behind me and I just stop and they bump into you, that's that movement sense. So again, I'm just like, it's just a game. It's like, where are you? I'm just constantly trying to find out, where are you and what do you need from me? I'm changing where I am for you, not you're demanding you to step somewhere else. So there's speaking in pictures, then using your healthy relationship to your body to help them. And then the other one is because of that, the oneness in their consciousness, they are one consciously with all. We try and also, when it comes to discipline, just make sure that when there's behavioural things, that what you're trying to show them is taking it into wholeness. So, for example, if they draw on the wall and you're like, that's it, you're not having books tonight, or you're not having ice cream next Saturday, that doesn't match the deed that I've done. So the deed that I've done is out of my energy, and then out of my energy also I can clean up my mistake. So we have to kind of make sure, and we've all of us have been schooled really erroneously around that. Yeah. And we use it as threats and power and, this is where it does come back to you because they start overpowering you and you're like, don't be overpowering people, but we're constantly overpowering children. We're not showing them a healthy relationship to power. So we're using our power in a healthy way, saying you made this mistake and with my help and your effort, you can also clean that up. So if you've hit your brother, I know you can hit. Now I'm going to show you how to care for someone. And if you're dysregulated and they're dysregulated, probably not a good time to teach them to how to care for someone. Yeah. But you can do it later on and they're still getting the lesson. You don't have to, and this is our thing, we have to do it right here, right now. They've said this, I'm fixing it right now, rather than going, you've broken the vase, I'm losing the plot because I asked you not to touch the vase. Literally, I have put a washing basket over the top of broken things until I'm like over the broken thing being broken and they're in a much better space. So even with, Silas at the moment, she's 3 and she's like in this really hitty phase with her sister. I've never had such a hitter or a biter. But I think she has to take so much more in family-wise. And it's just not good. If she's hit Persephone, her 10-year-old sister, I can't be like, okay, now let's get the cloth and, help our sister out, because she'll go within arm's reach over and keep going. Yeah. So I got to wait for that to calm down. And then it might be at dinner I'll say, oh, Silas, let's take Persephone's plate over to the dishwasher for her. So it's like you can give the lesson anytime, but make sure you give it in a place where there's a foundation for it to land onto. So with it, when it comes to behaviour or like discipline, I guess, is that making sure that what I'm doing matches the thing that they've done.
Gosh, I've heard that so many times, and yet I still have such because you want it done in the moment. You want it to be fixed and stopped, and we're all done in the moment, as opposed to being like, and because you know damn well if you threaten with ice cream or we're not getting this, they stop. And obviously it's not a positive thing because it's
not my children
they're shutting
anymore.
down. Oh,
I've overused it.
You've overused it, Dal.
They're dead to it now.
Yeah. I gotta go.
Anything you say is nothing now. And my partner's always like, you have to follow through with that now at the very least. I'm like, well, I can't because I want ice cream. Like,
it's so true though, isn't it? I want the fizzy drink, so I'll just let that one slide.
If Togga ever like uses one of those things and I'm like, you take that back. We're going to get
like, it affects us all. Great. Now you've ruined our weekend.
Exactly. Can we at least consult about this thing before you take it away? Because we all know it's going to happen. And like, sometimes happens with my partner. It's like, right, we're not going to the beach. It's like, well, you're not going to the beach and you're staying home with them, but I'm still going to the beach. And in fact, I don't want to take all the kids to the beach by myself, so you can have all of them.
And then you end up having an argument and you're like, great, well, how did this happen?
This is this constant learning, isn't it? It's actually really in that moment to have empathy for the person who's threatening, because they feel
so unregulated,
disempowered. Actually, you feel like so run over by your whatever's happening.
By your 1-year-old.
By your 1-year-old. Well, it's actually in your hands, not them. It's just their behaviour. My dad always had this saying that was like, the only thing that's in your hands is your reaction to someone else's actions. And it's like, you cannot control someone else's actions, but your reaction is completely in your hands. I'm like, that guy was so wise. Like,
oh, so good. My dad actually said something similar. And it's something I've carried along, not put into practice always, but I have carried it with me. So,
but it's one of the biggest discrepancies for sort of middle school and high school, where this sort of overpowering happens, you know, and I think you can have the most calm and connected people and they're still overpowering, manipulating their children. It might not be as obvious, and that lives in all of us. It's not, doesn't mean there's something wrong with you, but that's usually those polarities again. One wants to overpower and the other one will want what they want, and then so the middle is always that place you're seeking, and you can't have the middle without those two guys there. So so just make, you know, when I work with the young people, they're just like, I know I'm going to get it anyway. And it just, but the pain of that is something they can't digest until they're an adult, because they don't have the adult faculties to do it. So there has to be a better way. And good luck finding that better way.
Well, no, it sounds like there is a better way, and this has been incredibly helpful.
So good. It's been so good to have you in here, Melanie. It's really, I've had so many mind-blowing moments just now, and I've heard you talk before, so it's
Can
really
we have
awesome.
that little journal that you've got on your nightstand?
There's a little bit of a joke.
So we can try and like figure some stuff out.
It's a bit of a joke because I'm like, if my children ever in a like full-time relationship in their future, should I just hand the book here's
a copy
book to this child if you really
this
want
is
to know
what you
how
put
they
me through
tick.
at times, just so you know.
You know, I think it's just that, again, just to remember that the striving to make the change also has an effect on our children, and the children are showing us where we need to grow. It doesn't mean you don't like pull your hair out, and there's just so many times I'm still pushed to the edge. That's what I'm saying, like how many parts of there that need to grow. But it's that edge that actually helps you wake up. And what that is one of the things that Steiner talked about, is that we have the inspiration and it moves us. Like you had a thought and you're like, wow, I've had a light bulb moment and I feel changed just by the light bulb moment. But to take it into the earth sphere solidifies that inspiration and that change. And so for me, it literally is, I've got a whiteboard marker next to my fridge, blue tack, and I just write what I'm working with.
We need to get journals for these conversations. Hey?
Oh, seriously.
Yeah, because you think you're never going to forget. And in the digital world where, you know, there are a lot of these podcasts, there's like social media, and there's like a deadening to the inspiration really moving and changing us and then taking into the form. So one of the things that Steiner said, and this is in the 1800s, the first thing to bring it into a deed in the earth is to write it in your own handwriting, because your handwriting is completely individual to your own form. So that's kind of why I started writing it down. And the teenagers call it my fridge of morals. What's Mum working on now? All right, she's going to be patient. Let's give that one a little.
Sure, Mum.
Let's be cool here. Yeah.
But the wonderful thing is that you're growing muscles that you don't even know you're growing. You know, when you go to the gym and you're like, you don't even know you're growing the muscles. You just feel like you're not getting anywhere, and then one day you get to see it. That's what it's like on the parenting journey, is that you're preparing for these years that are to come. And so you think it's just about this moment, but it's way bigger than that. This muscle that you don't even know you're going to pull on later on. And it's useful to see how far you've come. Like, I really think you do need to celebrate, I got it, I did something different today, but also have that humility to know there's still a lot of growing to go. And amongst friends, you know, often you can see that. Like, you might go, oh, look, I really just value how you are this way with your children, and you're like, oh, I didn't even know I was that way. But you can see each other's capacities easier than when you can see your own. But that's actually part of it as well. In that book, for me, it's like, oh, there is a wise part of me, because even though I feel stuck right now, the wise part wrote that later on. So it's there somewhere. It's got to find it.
Oh, amazing. Well, Melanie, where can our listeners find you if they want more information?
Yeah, so I work with developingtheself.org. I think that's where you can find a lot of resources around Steiner's work from my colleagues from around the world. And then you can email me at info@developingtheself.org. And I do work one-on-one with clients, but also if you want us to come to a school that you're at that I'm not going to yet, then feel free to.
I'm going to sign you up.
It is really lovely working with one-on-one, because it's so personal to looking into your own past, but also, yeah, it's really great to have a community. I'm not sure if they can speak to each other on your social media page, but, you know, really share what are you working on, what makes it hard, you know, even between yourselves, like share that energy of what are you working on?
That's how this really came apart.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
But, like, we need to work on stuff.
Yeah, like how hard is this? What are we going to do about it? Let's do it. Figure it out. Do you know anything about this? Yeah.
But to be fair, like I've got a social media page, but I don't even post on it. Like, people just find me. I just fully trust that. So Practical Holistic Parenting is my Instagram page. You can also
we'll link that.
Message me through there. And I'm happy for people just to ask quick questions. Like, if it's bigger than that, I'll be like, okay, I think we need to have an appointment. But, you know, this is all well and good, but then I'm trying to get my kid off the trampoline for dinner. Excuse me, how do I do this? Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Road to Wisdom podcast. To join the journey, you can follow us on Instagram at theroadtowisdom.podcast and at www.theroadtowisdompodcast.com. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. We look forward to seeing you next week with more juicy content.